Hello guys, welcome back to another video, and due to studio interference on this video, I have to play it safe and not stray too far away from the usual formula, so... Has anyone heard of beans?
The number 3. I'm sure you're all aware that it comes after the number 2, and that means that after a film sequel, usually titled 2, the next sequel usually has 3 in the title, unless they do one of those weird ones where they change it to some random subtitle. Don't you hate it when films don't just stick to the good old 2 or 3, and instead go for some weird title? I think it makes it too confusing as to which film it is and when it takes place in the series. For example, Mission Impossible Rogue Nation has no indication of where it takes place in the Mission Impossible franchise, while Iron Man 2 tells you exactly which entry it is in the Iron Man series. Anyway, once a film gets a sequel and it's successful, the studio suddenly realises that the film can be turned into a large franchise and begins to make a third film. However, there are often many challenges to developing a threequel. At this point in the series, the formula has already been set, and this new entry doesn't usually wish to stray too far from what made the first 2 films successful. This often causes the film to lose its uniqueness and makes the film seem too similar. There are sometimes also problems of directors becoming bored of a series and moving on, or the studio believing that they know what to do with the film and fully taking over decision making. These two can often affect a film negatively and make it feel generic or formulaic. Now, let me first show you an example in the form of Iron Man 3. Director of first Iron Man and Iron Man 2, Jon Favreau, was replaced on this film due to being unhappy with how much of his style and direction were controlled by the higher-ups at Marvel Studios. This left the film feeling very different under the direction of Shane Black, which made many people like it less, especially with some of the decisions made in the film, such as the fake Mandarin twist. While I didn't enjoy the film much as a lad, as I mostly wanted to see Tony Stark suit up as Iron Man, and then he spends most of the film without his suits, however I really enjoy the film now as it explores the character of Iron Man, and how he is feeling after the alien invasion in Avengers. Overall, I think this is an example of a change of pace benefiting the film, as Iron Man 2, while I still enjoy, was mostly the same as the first one, and 3 kept it more interesting. On the other hand, let's look at a threequel where the change of director really negatively impacted it. The Rise of Skywalker is one of those films that I often make myself forget was ever made. Now, unlike many examples of directors changing, the previous film's director, Rian Johnson, was replaced by the director of the film before that, J.J. Abrams. Due to the very different styles of The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, much of this film felt like Abrams undoing the changes made in the last film so that he could tell the story he wanted, and spending time on these changes dragged the film down plot-wise. I mean, there wasn't too much of a great plot anyway.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Also, I think that there was a lot of studio interference, so that probably didn't help. Now, here's the thing. Many threequels are known for playing it safe and sticking to the styles and conventions of the last 2 films. A great example of this is Terminator 3, which basically recycled the plot of Terminator 2. This was a completely fresh plot compared to the first film, and this set a precedent in the franchise which has persisted to this day, which is copying Terminator 2. However, on the complete opposite side of the spectrum, we have Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift, which completely revamped the series and set it in a whole new direction, with a new cast of characters, but I mean, it didn't work out too well as they went back to the old style with the next film, so I guess playing it safe isn't so bad, just not when the film plot is completely recycled. An example of an interesting sequel is Spider-Man 3. This film has an infamous history of being meddled on by the studio who forced director Sam Raimi to add Venom into the film when he wanted to focus on Sandman. You can tell that the addition of Venom was a strange one into this series, as it mostly focused on the 60s Spider-Man comics, which didn't really fit the 80s and 90s style of Venom. While this film often gets a lot of flack, I actually don't mind it. I think a lot of the negativity is because of how great Spider-Man 2 was, and how at the time people expected this one to be as good. Looking back on it now though, Spider-Man 3 wasn't that bad, just not as good as the first 2. Bear in mind I'm ignoring these scenes. Another thing I noticed with threequels is that they often bring back older elements if they were lost in the second film. For example, Cars 3 went back to the original Cars format after the second film. This is also done with reboots. The Daniel Craig James Bond films changed up the formula and gave them a more realistic and modern style. However, with the third film they began to reintroduce classic Bond elements and tried to return the series to the status quo, which was later completed with Spectre. Star Trek also did this with their J.J. Abrams reboot, with the third one featuring a new director and bringing back more elements from the classic Star Trek films. However, this isn't always a bad thing, as Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade ditched the style of Temple of Doom and went back to the style of the first film, and that is my personal favourite of the Indiana Jones movies. Now, overall, the third movies are usually not as good as the first two. It's hard to think of many films where the third one is considered the best. There are many reasons for this, but at this point, the studios usually wish to keep it safe, not introducing much new stuff to the series and mostly sticking to the formula that they know works with the older films. I think that some films should get a third one, movies such as Star Wars and the MCU where they're telling a larger story over multiple films, but standalone films could get at least one sequel, like Terminator, but not a whole franchise made out of them.
Okay, that's it. I'm tired of sticking to the formula. From now on, I'm going to be as risky as possible. Just like my new catchphrase. Hello. It's me. I'm sure this will go great. Oh.
And tried to return the series to the status quo,